want to thank the San Pedro International Film Festival and Cabrillo for hosting this screening today. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and for sticking around. This is a really special opportunity to speak with the co-directors of this film, as well as some local experts who are here to kind of share their perspective on the DDT challenge in our backyard here. I want to thank the San Pedro International Film Festival and Cabrillo for hosting this screening today. And just wanted to give some context. We have about 45 minutes for this session. We'll have about 15 minutes of led conversation here. I'll prompt some questions for our panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions from all of you. We'll have some mics in the audience as well, so please be thinking of those questions you'd like to ask the people we have here today. So we're going to go down the line. I'm going to have people introduce themselves, kind of where they're from and how they've been engaged with the DDT issue to date. So I'll start with myself. I'm Amalia Arruda Almada. I'm from the USC Sea Grant program. Sea Grant's a national network that focuses on research, education, and outreach to promote conservation and sustainable use of our coastal resources. So we have 2 Sea Grant programs in California, one in San Diego and one at the University of Southern California. And we've been partnering since Rosanna's LA Times article broke in 2020 to try and understand what the most urgent research questions are to get to the bottom of the extent of the DDT dumping issue and what the potential impacts are. So Rosanna and Daniel's film point to some of the ongoing research happening. We engage with researchers in 2021 to try and have a community-driven effort for the researchers and local community members to have a say on what they felt was most important to fund for research. And from that, we were really fortunate the state, through the Water Management Agency, put forward 5.2 of state funds, million of state funds. Federal funds through NOAA have come through, much of which to Scripps as well. So Sea Grant has been shepherding the administration of those research projects. January 20th, 2026, we're gonna have a public meeting to share what the results are of those 3-year funded studies from the state. So we encourage you to check that out. So enough from me, but I wanted to again thank Heal the Bay and for all their efforts as well. They were really the drivers to get those state funds for the research that we're helping to administer now. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Rosanna to introduce herself and share a little bit about her. Well, we know what her interest and background in DDT is, but we'll move from there.
Yeah, I was like, I'm the only one that doesn't need to introduce myself. I'm Rosanna Shaw, environmental reporter for the LA Times. I'm one of the directors and producers of the film, and I also just want to shout out Austin Straub in the back, our cinematographer, editor, producer, archival researcher, all of the things. This film is beautiful because of Austin, so I just want to shout that out. And we were so lucky to have such an incredible panel of speakers joining us today. We were very lucky to have Dr. Gold and Nancy Shrodes here.
I'm Daniel Straub. I'm one of the directors and producers alongside Rosanna, and yeah, super grateful for you all taking time out of your Saturday morning to be bummed out by this movie and hopefully slightly encouraged by this panel.
I'm Nancy Shrodes. I'm the Associate Director of Watershed Programs at Heal the Bay. Heal the Bay is a local environmental nonprofit who works to make sure our inland waters and our coastal waters are clean, healthy, and safe. And we've been at this work for 40 years now. A lot of thanks to Mark Gold for that. And so we, for 20 years, had an angler outreach program where we were educating recreational and subsistence anglers to let them know which fish species were safe to eat and not. We reached over 190,000 anglers in this way, and Cabrillo Marine Aquarium also has done a lot of help here at Cabrillo as well. That's part of the Fish Contamination Education Collaborative work. And it's really, really important. A lot of the folks here, we have people that go out that are multilingual, educating people so that what they bring home is safe for their families and to know what they can eat and not eat, as far as making sure they're eating fillets and all of that. And then on the advocacy side of things, Heal the Bay, and thanks for the shout out, Amalia, was definitely very instrumental in securing that state funding that matched the federal funds for the research that has been ongoing. And we will be co-facilitating with Sea Grant at that January 20th meeting. And with that, I will kick it to Mark.
Hey everyone, Mark Gold. You got to see me in my youth.
You are wearing the same shirt again. I just want to know.
You know, the beauty of doing multiple panels is I have to hear that joke from Rosanna every time. So I was at Heal the Bay. I was their first hire and ran that organization for about 20 years. During the latter part of the film, I was at the Natural Resources Defense Council. And currently I'm at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which you saw quite a bit in the film, and I run the CalCOFI program. So you might have seen Bryce Simmons, so I now have his gig looking at these sorts of issues. So glad to have the discussion.
CalCOFI is the coolest long-term monitoring program in not only California, it's truly just one of the most remarkable long-term data sets in terms of how we study the ocean across just methodically since the 40s, and it is just a treasure for the marine research community, and there's no other data set like that in the world. I just want to shout that out.
Hey, thanks, Rosanna. Yeah, it's the oldest and biggest coastal ocean monitoring program in the country. 76 years, and cruise goes out tomorrow.
Yeah, and also just the cruises are quarterly, right?
Yes, cruises are quarterly, and it's been going on, like I said, 76 years, if you can believe it. And it goes from Mexican border to north of San Francisco Bay for half the time, and Central Coast for the rest of the time.
And this is like one of the most studied parts of the ocean because of it. And also to say, Heal the Bay, we're very lucky that with Mark at the beginning, Nancy, and the incredible team kind of guiding the future of this organization. But just like, even just looking at the logo with the not healthy fish on your logo, I just think it is remarkable, and really we should all be grateful as a community to have an organization like Heal the Bay with such institutional knowledge on just the ecosystem and the health of our bay. And Sea Grant is just an incredible facilitator of both research and the community and just bridging the science and policy. I am done filling in everyone's introductions, but we are just so lucky to have all of you on this panel.
Thanks, Rosanna. So first question for you. I think we're all really privileged to have your series of articles in the LA Times to really resurface this issue and then really give us updates on our latest understanding. So I'm curious for your perspective on turning this into a documentary film, from your article to film. What inspired that?
Yeah, thank you. And I would just say that I've written a number of follow-ups since that first article. I'm very excited for the January 20th meeting, and I'll be writing a lot next year as more of the research comes out. But when that first article came out, it was like my phone, my inbox, everything exploded. It is to this day one of the most widely read articles on the LA Times website. And Senator Dianne Feinstein at the time, threw the front page article onto our chief of staff's desk and was like, "Call the EPA, we need to do something about this." And it really did activate this incredible community of scientists and researchers and policymakers and advocacy groups and just people in terms of reactivating the questions that we had forgotten to ask about our relationship to the ocean and our relationship to chemicals and the more invisible aspects of our environment. And in tandem, I got flooded with phone calls and emails and queries from filmmakers being like, "Oh my God, we need to turn this article into a movie." And I was like, "Oh my God, no." And I was just really nervous because that first article was just the beginning. This is an active investigation that's still ongoing. The amount of time it takes me to build trust with the scientists who welcome me into their labs before their data is completely fine-tuned, before their papers are peer-reviewed and ready to be, ready for showtime. Like, that trust takes a lot of work, and the thought of bringing a camera team in was like, also just to be able to get the nuance. Like, this is a story that does not need to be sensationalized, and I think it was just really hard for me to think about what a film could look like. So I just kept writing. You know, the LA Times helped me take a bunch of meetings. None of it felt quite right. I think I was also just really nervous at that time. And then Daniel and his brother Austin basically ambushed me at a book talk a year later as I was still writing about the issue. And they were like, their ask wasn't, can we make a movie with you? It was, can we join you in the field the next time you go out? And it happened that I was planning to go out later that week with Professor Valentine, you know, right down the street at SCMI, and to go back out to the dump site. And so I think, you know, we weren't sure if it was going to be a short film, feature film, anything. And I think just within that first day, it was really beautiful that, you know, Daniel and Austin just really absorbed the flow of the science and the journalism and really didn't get in the way of anything, really built trust from that first day. And everyone just had a feeling that this was the right team to tell the story visually. And sonically, as you can tell with the score too, we brought in a composer pretty early on in the process as well. And I think the final result of this film, like, so Daniel basically turned to me that first day and he's like, Rosanna, my first decision as a director, you know, of whatever this project is going to be is to also make you a director. Let's find this film together. And usually when you see a film with a journalist in it, the journalist is like the quote unquote on-screen talent. You know, they're not directing the film, or the film is like an adaptation of their journalism or a recap of their journalism. And this film truly is just my journalism. And it's an extension of the way we've been reporting the story, just told beautifully through Daniel and Austin's incredible talent as filmmakers. And I think it is just, I think that the integrity of the journalism, this is an LA Times piece of journalism just told in film form, has ended up being like a really remarkable project that's pretty rare for a documentary. I don't know if you want to build on that.
No, that covers it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we were fans of your reporting, so to get to work with you and the Los Angeles Times on the project was really, really cool. So we feel really honored to be a part of telling the story about the science that's being done and this issue that impacts this community, but is also a warning for so many other issues that are impacting communities across the country. And that's been something that's been kind of haunting about playing this film. This is our 20th film festival now, that we played in the last year. And every city we go to, regardless of where it is, they have an issue like this that's impacting their community. They're gathering after and saying, what do we do about this thing in our community? And this one is kind of in particular special because if you were to punch a hole through that wall, the issue is happening a couple miles that direction. This is the closest that you could play this film in the theater to where the dump site is. And so, yeah, thank you all for coming out and thank you for the work that's being done to inform the public about this and to advocate for science that needs to be done. So.
Thanks for that. My next question is, what's the significance of doing this film festival? So you touched on that, but I think it means a lot, especially for us, even in the LA region, to have something so local here and the work being done out at the pier to engage with the anglers here is really, you know, relevant to us. I wanted to ask more to give a little context. This was touched on in the end of the film a little bit, but this is, you know, the deep ocean disposal is a really, you know, more recently resurfaced, but often Salisbury and Shelf have a long history of DDT contamination as well. Could you give a really quick primer on what that history is and how that connects to the deep ocean disposal?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So you have a situation where the Montrose Chemical Company, as you saw, the largest manufacturer of DDT on the planet in Torrance. And the focus of EPA and NOAA and the Department of Justice was on natural resources damages and Superfund focusing on the land side, the whole Del Amo area, as well as the Palos Verdes Shelf, so about 17 square kilometers on the shelf. And so there was no focus at all on the deep ocean. And as a matter of fact, there was a lot of discussions. I was on the technical advisory committee for this for well over a decade. On, you know, how much do we even know about what's going on there? And it was, if you look at the settlement, it's not even really in there other than, you know, just mentioned in like one sentence, which is catastrophic. So your sources of DDT were, you have polluted runoff that went down Dominguez Channel. So the mouth of Dominguez Channel, as you know, consolidated slip area, very close to here. That contamination is still there, never was remediated, never cleaned up. That would have been the easy part to clean up, and it still never happened. And so you got to ask yourself, ask the regional water board, state water board, EPA, why that never happened, but it never happened. The harder part was what came out of the sewage treatment plant at the outfall at White Point, which is 1.2 and 1.4 miles offshore. It's a split outfall. And in that case, you have, so that came from the sewage. So all the wastewater that was coming from the Montrose Chemical Company, you had not the best sewage treatment plant in the world back then. No, you know, basically during most of this, there was hardly any, if any, secondary treatment to remove a lot of the sewage solids. And so you had hundreds and hundreds of tons, thousands, I think 1,700 tons if I remember correctly, that came out of the PV shelf, the outfall there. And so that, for 20 plus years, now we're at 25 years since the settlement, there isn't even a final remedial action plan on what to do there. Like, everybody assumed there would be some sort of focused capping project, like not capping the whole shelf, that would have been ridiculous, but to pick the worst hotspots and actually put a clean cap of sediment. And there was even a pilot project that was done very poorly, where they just dropped all the sediment from the surface of the ocean, and it caused resuspension of DDT. And so they never pursued it, but it was something that could be done because the depths, are basically 200 to 400 feet where the most contaminated sediments are. But now, all bets are off in deep ocean when you're looking at 3,000 feet deep, and from the standpoint of what can you do there for remediation. If we can't even remediate consolidated slip, we can't even remediate the Palos Verdes shelf with capping, what are you supposed to do when you probably have 100 square miles of contamination? We don't even know the total volume. The big lesson here, and I hope this is what everyone got out of this film, is let's not make these dumb mistakes ever again, from the standpoint of persistent organic pollutants that are going to end up causing problems for generations, if not centuries, to come. And you see what's going on with PFAS right now, and it feels like deja vu to me all over again.
Thanks for that, Mark. Yeah, it's a helpful segue. My next question before we open to the audience was, what is one takeaway that you'd like the audience to take from this film? Is there anything you want to add, or you're good on that?
Well, everybody wants to know what they can do, and one of the things, so proud of the work that Heal the Bay did over the years. It was a big part of the settlement. We did a contaminated fish study back then on fish that was sold in local community markets. Redondo Pier was actually one of the biggest hotspots. And the fact that we found DDT and PCB concentrations in those fish that were so high and posed such a substantial health risk was a really important part of the settlement with the federal government and getting the $140 million to move forward. And then when that finally moved forward, Heal the Bay playing such a tremendous role in the peer education program and got an EPA award, Environmental Justice Award, working with Cabrillo and others to do that work. To me, it's like, yeah, maybe we can't solve the problem, but we should still be vigilant from the standpoint of making sure that it's not going to continue to cause cancer risk and other health risks for decades to come. And I think that's a big thing to take from the film, that we can still do and do well.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So one of the big things I think it's important to take away is to continue to have this issue raised in the public consciousness. I know when the story broke, it got a lot of energy and momentum behind looking more into this research. And so I think having a lot more eyes, as you guys have gone through all these film festivals, and awareness on the issue will help to continue to engage on it and drive forward. And so Heal the Bay at this moment, we have a petition available that we've launched to OEHA, it's the Office of Environmental Hazard and Health Assessment, and that's under the umbrella of Cal EPA. And we want them to call for new studies so that they can upgrade their health assessments to continue to protect public health. So we have a petition outside. Zoe's in the back, she can wait. If you all want to sign on and help us in that advocacy work. And I think it's going to continue, we need to continue to beat the drumbeat and let policymakers and agencies know that this is problematic and they have to act.
Yeah, I would say like the thing that I've been thinking about every time we play this film is that like our actions have these long-term ramifications. This is something that happened 60, 70, 80 years ago, the invention of DDT leading up to the ban and then the dumping. This is something that happened quite a long time ago that's still having impacts on us today. And the only reason that we can study the impacts of it, the only reason we can go back and interrogate this is because of the work that was done to preserve and document this. So the work that CalCOFI is doing, it seems expensive, it seems excessive. There's a lot of these jars in this program. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jars in this collection. And it's a very extensive program. But then when you need to go back and interrogate the past like this, there is no other way to do it. The only alternative would be to go back in time and grab these samples, which you can't do. And then on the archival side of things, Austin did an incredible job of just digging through the archives and resurfacing a lot of these old films that were captured. And a lot of them weren't these like hidden camera kind of like, oh, we got them in the act. It was instructional. This is like a commonplace thing that was being done that they were filming and other people were filming. Some of these were from documentarians from 40 years ago that were doing documentaries on the sardine population off the coast of Santa Barbara. So we had all this incredible footage that we could go back and interrogate. And I think that to me has felt increasingly important as we've gone around. It's just the importance of supporting these long-term data sets and long-term archives for both the science and the film side of things so that when these things happen, we can go back and we can get answers about what happened.
All of the above. And I will just add to, like, I think, you know, I'm the coastal ocean reporter for the LA Times, and I think we do tend to still have such a land-centric way of thinking about our environment, right? And even in the environmental world. And I think that it is all connected. And I think something that I get overwhelmed with, and I know the two of you do too, is like the ocean is increasingly seen as like a solution for climate change and all of the things we need for the future, right? You know, blue carbon economy, aquaculture, growing kelp in the ocean is going to save everything, mussels, oysters, all of that. And I think I can't help but think that how can we think about the ocean and turn to the ocean as a solution for the future when we do not fully understand and know what we have already done to it? And I think that ultimately having this baseline of knowledge in order to inform how we think about these next steps, how we think about the future is so critical. And to be able to reach that baseline knowledge, to establish that, really takes the science and, you know, the journalism. And I think, and just the amount of people who are willing to commit to, and documentarians, to unravel the truth and to share it with the public in a way that does help inform, that isn't politicized. And so I think one of the things that Daniel and I have been really moved by just taking this film to so many places is just also realizing that, you know, this film is about one chemical that got dumped off of one coast in one part of the ocean, but it is truly a proxy for all of the watersheds and all of the coastlines in the world, and every single chemical that we should be questioning with, you know, more thoughtfulness and nuance. And it is also a film that shows you the process of science, right? And not just, you know, here's the finding, here's the paper that got published, and you now have to believe it, boom. Or journalism too, here's the article, no context in how we reached this finding, but we're now telling you to read it and to trust it. And I think that at a time when there is so much mistrust in both science and journalism, this film has actually turned out to be a really beautiful way to help rebuild that trust slowly, one screening at a time, and to bring people physically together in a theater, and to remind everyone how much commonality we still do have with each other. So we were just in Indianapolis, we played this in Cleveland, we played this in Montana. It is really cool to think about how film can also be a really activating way to get people to think about these issues in a way that like a print newspaper article might not be.
Thank you all. It's really helpful, wonderful responses. So we now have some time for our audience questions. We have about 15 minutes. have a few mic runners, so please raise your hand, provide your name, and a short question.
Ooh, short question. All right, really short is going back to the analogy of long-term effects. Of course, climate change, we're also dumping in the ocean. But I'll also say I have a very unusual perspective here. I worked analyzing DDT in compounds way back when using pack column, and when it first became, I think it was Heal the Bay, all of a sudden said, this is a big issue again. I'd been saying, oh, it's old news, we know it's out there. We've been analyzing this for years and years. I was with the sanitation districts. And then all of a sudden it was a big, big issue, and then it kind of settled down again, and fight still going on with the DDT Superfund site in Del Amo, as well as off the PV shelf. But now you're bringing it back to the public again, raising it so much more. And this is just so important. And Chemical Engineering News, has the manufacturers complaining about all the restrictions on them. They're trying to get all these new chemicals out, and there is concern about regulating them, and there's a whole backlog of analyzing them. And this, again, brings it right back again. So thank you very much. Thank you.
A very moving documentary, very moving. It brought me to tears at one point. You see, 40 years ago, my publication here in San Pedro broke the story about PCBs in the fish in the harbor. And then we followed up with, of course, the DDT being dumped off of Palos Verdes, and followed the story all the way to the Montrose settlement. And for all of this time, we thought, well, that's settled. But hearing you talk about the mouth of the Dominguez Channel, reading your story, which I found fascinating, about Dr. Valentine's cans, only shows how much hasn't been done. And I think that everyone that's in this audience today would like to know what those answers are, but what you've told us is that there really aren't. And I would hope that there, a PV shelf and the Dominguez Channel were specific things that we could do. But tell me, what is there to be done?
So you've touched upon a couple of things, and I think, because this issue hit this community more than any other community that this is shown at, I think we get to have a unique conversation. So I want to remind everybody that when the natural resources damages and Superfund case was settled, it didn't include impacts to marine mammals. Think about that for a minute, and what the focus of this was. It didn't include impacts on condors at all, zero. So the $140 million, which seemed like a lot, it was the second largest natural resource damages case in history after the Exxon Valdez at that point. Now you realize it's missing a zero, from the standpoint of what the impacts truly were versus what we thought they were. And so I bring that up just for context to let you know how the issue has grown over time. And none of us in our worst nightmares, nobody thought 100 square miles. No way. That this, there's still no delineation of the entire deepwater dump site, if you can believe it. So the fact that there were dump sites designated by the federal government is kind of a joke, because I don't think anyone hit the target, did they? I don't know. It didn't look like it from all that. But to sort of close on your question, consolidated slip's solvable. It's not going to be cheap, but it's solvable. And there's a long history for why it hasn't happened that I'm not going to bore people with. But you can imagine the political complexities because it's in the Port of LA, and the Port of LA isn't the one who caused the problem. So you can understand their concern. PV shelf, I don't know what to say. Look, EPA, it didn't matter, it's bipartisan inaction in that regard on doing anything from, the fact there isn't a remedial action plan is a joke at this point. I will say on the natural resources damages side, there were some pretty cool projects that occurred, most notably, biggest reason we have bald eagles have returned to the Channel Islands, in seabird issues. So there's some positive things that have happened out of that settlement. Obviously, the work that Heal the Bay and others have done on public health, Cabrillo Aquarium as well on public health. But I don't want everyone to think it was all horribly negative, because the wildlife on the Channel Islands issue actually was a pretty big success story.
Good afternoon, my name is Albert Ramirez. I'm the president of ILWU, Local 56. We do environmental hazmat and ship scaling work at the docks, on the water, and inland. Actually joined with other ILWU family here, different locals, longshore, foremen. We actually had IBU, the Boatmen's Union. I remember hearing about DDT with the farm workers and their exposure rate, and to hear that obviously this is still occurring today. We welcome this film to be shown to our rank and file. We've been talking to our hazmat companies about DDT. Matter of fact, we have maps of DDT in our office here in San Pedro, here, literally not too far from here. Because we're like, okay, so what can be done? Or what's the thought process? And we advocated for Assembly Bill 343 with Marsucci and Lowenthal, and going to Sacramento, looking for resources and advocacy. We're basically kind of told, hey, we'll talk to Congresswoman Barragan or Robert Garcia, because this is a big fight. And we know what's happening at the federal level. I won't get into it, but count us as a partner. We're exposed to this. We live in the community. We work in the water, and I know it was shared that a lot of that chemical goes into the fats or blubber or whatnot. So that's something that we see as something that, whether it's now or 10 years from now, obviously it's going to be impacting us. So we want to be part of the solution. Count us in as a thought partner. I shared this information with some of our hazmat companies to spitball kind of like what that would look like, given the conversation about technology and whether it exists now or years from now. And there was some spitball of like, well, just throw concrete. Or how about we just get them out? Oh, will that make it worse? Or would we just leave it alone? Well, the exposure rate. So it's almost like pick your poison, no pun intended. So just, we're here in the community, the ILWU and the Boatmen's Union, but we would love to showcase this at our union hall if permitted next year, and would love to participate with that town hall in January.
Thank you guys for coming out too. We really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Dunya Georgievich. I'm actually a filmmaker, and I run an all-girl filmmaking program called Girl in Focus, and I was thrilled to see that you not were just in the film, but are one of the filmmakers as a woman, and both of you did an amazing job. Really powerful film. I want to look at it because I look at everything from sort of a macro perspective, and the message of this, I appreciated the detail, I appreciated so much understanding the science and the detail with which you delved into the story behind this as a journalist, and then putting yourself in the film really, really was powerful, just sort of Michael Moore style. Connecting to the subject in a very personal way. What's interesting to me is the short mention of the indigenous perspective of the way that we relate to nature at all, and the importance of working together, not just between, let's say, the journalists and the scientists, but just across the board in the way we communicate, and the power of film too.
Yeah, thank you. And a couple thoughts here. I'll just say, I'm so glad that the section of the film with Jessa and Gina Calderon, who are Chumash-Tumba, resonated with you. Because whereas I think, as an environmental reporter, I know Heal the Bay does this a lot, and Sea Grant reflects on this deeply. Just, who we choose to value as expert in these conversations is in our power, right? Beyond peer-reviewed science and lawyers and engineers with engineering licenses. These forms of knowledge are so critical, but also like
Where does indigenous knowledge fit in? Where does community, direct frontline experience fit into all of this? And I think this is something that we are all actively thinking about. And I think Heal the Bay, Scripps, Sea Grant all also do remarkable jobs thinking about this. And for me as a journalist, like when you choose to quote someone, you are giving that person power, right? Like when you're choosing to tell someone's story or center their perspectives, you are giving that perspective power. And I think as we are thinking about, reflecting on the past 80 years of this issue and thinking about how we move into the future, the way we tell this story is also an opportunity to redistribute some of that power and to also bring actively people into a conversation that they didn't realize they belonged to. And I think with the moment with Jessa and Tina, like that meditation comes in at a moment where like everyone in the audience realizes that they had forgotten to breathe for the last 40 minutes. And, and when we were rolling, like when we interviewed Jessa and Tina, I talk to them often, and I know Nancy actually works with them often too. And like, oftentimes when I'm talking to them, it's not like, I'm just riffing with them, I'm checking in on them, seeing what's going on, what they're thinking. And I think with that scene, we knew we wanted to bring their perspective into the film. We didn't know what it was gonna be. I think we loosely thought some kind of emotional anchoring, some kind of reaction. But when Austin, Daniel, and I rolled in, like, I'm talking to Jess and Tina and asked them that question: what can we do? How can we help people think about this issue? And Jessa reached across the table and held my hand, and she said, "Rosanna, let's do the grounding exercise." And that grounding exercise afterwards, like Austin and Daniel just kept rolling, and we're like, "Do we put the meditation in the film?" We're like, "Is this the hill we're gonna die on?" And we are still dying on this hill, and it's really powerful to be able to invite an entire audience to really just connect deeply for a moment. I would also just say that it's interesting, like this sense of like giving people hope to like feel like they can continue to move. Like, what can we do? I think step one is to just have the courage to not look away from this issue, to continue this conversation. I love being able to share that Sea Grant on January 20th will be creating yet another space for the community, anyone to come together to talk about this, to learn about the science as we continue to put all these puzzle pieces together. Heal the Bay is also thinking deeply about how to engage the community and how to think about just giving people the knowledge that they can take so that they feel at least empowered to continue talking to their neighbors, to their friends, to their colleagues, and to not be afraid that this is a problem without a clear answer, but it is something that we all have a duty to engage with, and to also kind of extrapolate outwards in terms of again, like what are the DDTs of today that we still do have so much power to think about, to reflect on, and to recalibrate whether or not our relationship to the way we're putting it out into the environment is what we want for the environment going into the future. So thank you. I just feel like you touched on so many things that really resonated with all of us, and yeah. And just, it's really powerful to be able to have this film shared with all of you today.
Thank you. So I know time is moving quickly, so we have time for 2 short questions, and then we'll come back for final thoughts. Thank you all for the great questions.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Bob Gelfand. I'm a molecular biologist, amongst other things. I'll skip all the other stuff, like working on the horseshoe crab DNA sequence organization way back when at Woods Hole, and just point out there's something. Well, first of all, your video editing was really excellent, and I want to thank you for that. And your sound acquisition was very competent. That's so unusual. One of the things you showed going through those stacks of bottles and so on is the importance of the continuity of data acquisition. The ability that we keep collecting samples year after year, and we don't just stop because of some nonsensical political partisan thing. And I don't know whether this is a question or not. How bad is it? Because I know it's bad. And I talked to other scientists who said they just stopped working on stuff. So I hope that people like you can do something about it. And journals like the LA Times.
I'm unaware. Hand the mic to somebody else.
I was going to say, I think that's my job, actually. So, first of all, those who know me, I'm never a shrinking violet, and I'm always going to call it out when there's something that's not right. And the reality is, one of the hardest things to fund in science as you know, based on your background, is ongoing monitoring. People want to be able to study something and get an answer on something in the next month. But as we see with the impacts, whether it's climate change, whether it's overfishing, whether it's DDT, we're going to start seeing it in microplastics as soon as we start monitoring for it. All these other sorts of things, you have to be looking at the environment over a long period of time. And the other thing is new techniques come out on analyses that didn't exist when the sampling started. Like, I mean, one of the things that, I know Nancy and I are just as excited about is a lot of the work that came out of this that Seagram funded through the state is we're no longer talking about 6 different types of DDT anymore. We're talking about like 60 plus. And so what that means is all the ecological risk assessment and health risk assessments have been grossly underestimated. I mean, that's what that means. Because we now have new techniques. Una Ho down at San Diego State is doing this incredible work looking at that. And that's going to be very helpful. I have a son who works on environmental DNA. And he works for NOAA. Not a fun place to be right now, as you might gather, at the Pacific Marine Environmental Lab. And you look at the CalCOFI treasure trove of samples that we have, and he's able to look at the assemblage of fishes and how it's changed over location over the last 30 years plus. Because now you can actually look at those jars, do environmental DNA analysis, and figure out what species of fish were anywhere near where that sample was collected. It's pretty extraordinary. So the importance of this, you hit it spot on, and one of the things that we need in California badly, and I will push for it in my gig, is we need a comprehensive state-of-the-art monitoring program for California's coast. We do not have that right now. We have like 50 different programs doing different things that are not coordinated like they need to be, and that's something that needs to change.
I was also going to say, I'm learning about Heal the Bay's petition for the first time, and that call is also for more monitoring, right? Like, I don't know if you want to just build on that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So it's for updated studies so that we know the extent of impact on species for public health protections. And encouraging them to work with other agencies as well to really move the needle forward. And we've had conversations with lots of different agencies on this front, but it's that collaboration and getting the science up there and using that for those public health advisories. Because it is, we're going off of really old data. So it's important that we reevaluate it now with the information we have now. Yeah.
Great question. Okay, final question. I know this is hard.
Hi, I'm Manijay Motagi. I am a cognitive behavioral psychologist, and I've written a book about the human development and how we need to have these inner skills and understanding of nature and systems and not creating wicked problems. And so thank you for working so hard to resolve these problems. My question was, within the research, has there been something to find out what is the resiliency in humans and animals where they are exposed, but they are actually being immune, so that we could use that data, that information to combat the DDT or chemicals as such?
No, and I would just say, I think the thing is, like, we banned DDT in 1972, and we thought we solved the problem. And I think it's interesting that with just the revival of the interest of this issue, there's now new science being activated to ask all these, your petition is asking to update monitoring, because it's been like since 2009, that was the last time that we had really studied comprehensively or to even think through what it is that we wanted to be monitoring for, and it's now 2025. So I think in some ways, there's just a huge gap in research that is now being reactivated, since we thought that we had quote unquote solved the issue. And I would say, but like, very generally speaking, when I talk to toxicologists, like DDT, PCBs, this family of chemicals is known to be some kind of immune suppressant, right? And getting cancer, for example, is multifactorial. You need triggers, but like, based on, like, but like I think what you saw with the sea lions, for example, like we are, the way Austin filmed that scene was so haunting and also moving, but like we are so much more connected to even, you know, the parts of the ocean that we think we're not connected to. And that was also part of the goal of the movie, to help us really think more deeply about our interconnectedness to the entire environment. And I think there's still so much that needs to be studied. To see the Public Health Institute up in Berkeley with Dr. Barbara Cohn having, again, with long-term data sets, blood samples from 15,000 women since the 50s, and then their daughters, and then their daughters' daughters, and just tracking over a course of multiple generations, like how a chemical continues to affect, a chemical exposure continues to affect, you know, someone, is really powerful. And I think that part of the importance is continuing that momentum, as that gentleman said earlier. And part of that importance is also to continue knowing to ask these questions, because for a really interesting gap of time, we just stopped asking and we moved on to the next quote unquote problem, but this one never got solved. So thank you for your question. That is just, you really hit the heart of so much of this.
I'd like to just briefly ask, what's the best way for people to stay connected with the story?
Yeah, so we have a website, outofplainsight.com. We're going to be posting, there's a page on there called Get Involved, and that will have updates from all of the different people in the film and the work that they're doing. The film itself is actually on Instagram as well, Out of Plain Sight Film. You can follow us for the latest screenings, and we actually just announced we're going to be doing a week of theatrical screenings in North Hollywood, November 19th through the 25th, and tickets are on sale now. So if you know people who should go see the film, there's a bunch of opportunities to go see it there that we're really excited about. So yeah, basically our website, and then I'm sure like all of the different organizations have websites, and there's people outside as well if people want to get more connected with that.
Yeah, I think on November 22nd, which is a Saturday, Heal the Bay will be rallying their community around that screening, and I know Dr. David Valentine from UC Santa Barbara will be at that Q&A. So definitely tell your friends up in North Hollywood and the Valley to check that screening out. I will just unapologetically say too that a documentary like this, we are trying so hard to get this film out to as many people as possible, and getting a review on Letterboxd, IMDb, telling your friends about this film, telling your neighbors about this film does really help. I think at a time when basically an environmental documentary is not necessarily the easiest sell, like just getting people to actually be engaged with this, the more you're able to help us prove that there is an audience for this film, that people care, it does really go a long way in helping also continuing the message of this film.
Is your film on YouTube?
It is not yet. So we have a trailer and stuff online right now. Basically what we're trying to do is find a distribution partner who can help get it in front of as many people as possible. Obviously the reporting has already been published in LA Times, and that's been great, but that only takes it so far. Same thing with YouTube, really you'd have to rely on that getting in front of the people that are already subscribed to it. So we're looking for, obviously, distribution that can get it in front of as many people as possible. So crossing our fingers that happens sooner than later, but in the meantime, we're playing film festivals, theatrical screenings, that kind of thing to try to get the word out.
Yeah, and so for updates on the research as well, please check out the tables outside. We have a listserv, or there's other ways to get involved. This is really a big deal. January 20th is the wrap-up of the 3 years of study, so we're really excited to see the outcomes there.
One last screening that I'll just mention, we do have a screening in Washington, D.C. at the National Academy of Sciences on December 11th. So if you have a politician that's in D.C. and they should see the film, maybe let them know. It's also on our website, so yeah.
All right, so I want to close with final thoughts from our panelists, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone, but now you have ways to get involved and stay in touch.
One of the things I hope everyone takes home today is the importance of investigative journalism and doing hard-hitting documentaries that aren't just true crime or sports documentaries. And it's something that we're seeing less and less investment from the media, but stories like this do not exist unless reporters have the time to delve into it at this level, unless documentarians have the time and the resources to do this. And so any way you can really make that clear, with whatever news media that you utilize on a regular basis, it's a huge concern. and that I just don't know where this issue would be if we didn't have Rosanna writing the pieces that she did, which really caught everybody's imagination, and just the horrifying images of seeing the barrels in the ocean were just extraordinary. And it has led to 15 million plus in research and expansion of our knowledge of what the impacts are of DDT in ways that we never would have even really thought before. So if there's anything you can do there, just please try to push for that. So now I'm not going to do my normal environmental push, but something that's extremely important there.
Well said, Mark. And to that point, I feel like as soon as that story broke, there was so much more momentum that happened along this issue and research that happened. So it's a big kudos, thank you to Rosanna and your reporting to put this back on the consciousness of community members and in front of legislators. And I think one of the things that's important to take away as well, and Mark mentioned this in the film itself, is what are we learning from this as far as future contaminants of emerging concern? The PFAS issue is huge, and today we've been speaking with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, trying to get water quality regulations on PFAS once they're in the environment. Until we have, chemical laws that companies have to prove that chemicals are safe before they hit the market, we need to make sure we have water quality regulations that are protective of human health and ecology and habitats. So I think it's really important that we continue to learn from this haunting history of legacy pollutants and make sure we don't repeat past mistakes.
Yeah, I would echo Mark on support local journalism. I'm not with the LA Times, but I'm a fan of their work, and I wouldn't know about the story had they not been doing the work they were doing, had you not been doing the work that you were doing. So support local journalism. If this film moved you in some sort of way, don't let that go to waste. There are ways to get involved with organizations like CalCOFI or call your politicians, telling them about this issue, support these long-term data sets that people in this team are working on. There are things that we can't do. So whatever you're feeling, the bummer of the movie that it was, don't let that get any waste, and try to make some good.
Oh my goodness, I'm really grateful. I think I'll just add quickly, thank someone today. I think that we are all so overwhelmed. I feel like burnout is so real. I was just catching up with someone in the EPA, and I do think that a lot of these jobs are thankless, and that, I think I was really grateful when I started, when Professor Valentine called me with that barrel image for the first time. The number of people who have been working on this issue for their entire careers, who dedicate their lives to this, who are willing to just do this hard work day in and day out, and so much of it is thankless. So I think, I'm grateful also for everyone's gratitude for the work that we're doing here. But I think, if there's anything you can do today, just take a moment and thank someone for the work that they're doing, because I think everyone needs just that moment. So thank you all for also being here today. It's just really special to be able to finally brought this film to this festival. Thank you to the San Pedro Film Festival. I know Ziggy's somewhere here, and I'm really grateful for this community and for just being able to share this afternoon with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.